Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Daughter Dearest podcast, where we have authentic mother daughter conversations about sometimes what you guys are thinking about inside your head, but you're too scared to talk about. I'm Simone Canego,
And I'm Olivia Canego.
and today we have a special guest.
Yes, we have a special guest joining us, Hayley Friedman. So, Hayley is 23 years old. She just finished her undergraduate degree and is now headed to law school. So,
Whoop,
big
whoop.
congratulations.
Yes.
She's a
Thank
huge mental
you.
health advocate, especially because of her own experiences. Hayley was officially diagnosed with anorexia nervosa in 2019 after struggling in silence for 3 years. She's been on the path to recovery ever since. Hayley, we are so excited for you to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have this conversation. Not that it's an exciting conversation because it's very emotional, but I think it's so important that we talk about these issues because again, as you said in your short bio that you struggled in silence for 3 years, and if we can help one person be able to talk about what they're going through, then we feel like we've done our job as a podcast. So we really appreciate you being here today. So tell us a
Yeah,
little bit
absolutely.
more about yourself because I know your mom very well. We've been besties for 10 years now. And shout out to Stacy. Hey, Stacy.
Woo, love her.
Yeah, love her too. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family and whatever you want to share with
Yeah.
us.
So I guess mental health wise, I've struggled with my mental health for years now. Definitely better as of late, but it probably started around high school. I think that's a really difficult time just in general for a lot of people with body image and mental health. Um, Family wise, in my free time, I love spending time with my family. I have my mom, my dad, my younger siblings, Abby and Jesse, who I love, being a role model for. I love to spend time with them. I love to spend time with my boyfriend. I super interested in, binge watching Netflix shows, as I'm sure so is the rest of the world. Um, I'm a feminist. I'm really passionate about reproductive justice and, of course, a mental health advocate.
Love it. Okay, what are you binge watching right now? Or what are
I
you watching
actually
right now?
just, yeah, I just started watching Fubar, which
Oh,
is with Arnold Schwarzenegger on Netflix. Really love it. Pretty funny. Spy show.
yeah, we just finished actually watching that like about a couple
Oh,
of weeks
really?
ago. Yes, we loved it. It
That's
I
was
have
so
really,
no clue what
funny.
this show is.
oh, well, there you
Well,
go.
I,
Okay,
I
you
feel like
learned
You'll have to
something.
check it
I'm
out.
the small population who doesn't watch TV. Today, I watched Pride and Prejudice for the second time in this week. And besides that, I don't think I've watched anything on Netflix in about two
Love
months.
that.
Yeah.
You know what? Fair
Well,
enough.
I just finished watching The Bear. If you haven't watched
Ooh,
that, it's on
I
Hulu.
haven't.
It's a cooking show. Excellent. Yes, I
I'll
binge
check
watched
it
that
out.
like completely. There's 2 seasons. I'm like, when I watched the last one I watched yesterday, I was like, okay, I need the third season, and I don't know if they're going to have one yet or not, but I'm hoping so. So if you're listening to me,
Fingers crossed for
have the
you.
third season of The Bear. Thank you. Okay, so let's get serious. So I really want to talk more about anorexia. And I did some research and I read that women have anorexia at 3 times higher the rate than men. And 95% of people with an eating disorder are between 12 and 25. And also, so think about this, one out of every 100 young women between 10 and 20 years old have anorexia. Those are huge numbers. And I just don't think we talk about it enough. So, kind of tell me what I guess tell me your experience and tell me why do people not talk about it? Just like anything
You
with mental
know,
health. I mean, I know the answer to that,
yeah.
but like we need to talk about it more.
I think there is a really big issue where people don't see eating disorders or mental health problems as being as important as a physical ailment. But the thing is that both of those things are physical ailments. They are full mental illnesses, which means that there's something wrong with the chemistry inside of your brain, and that is 100% physical. Um, I think people forget about that sometimes, and so they don't really tend to talk about eating disorders or mental illnesses. I think also the way that society places such an emphasis on diet culture, and how normal it is to get involved in some kind of dieting, whether that's being paleo or you know cutting out some other kind of a food group,
Mhm.
um, or even just watching your calories, like Weight Watchers. It is super, super common. And so I think that it kind of, slips over people's heads a little bit, that there are real serious problems and that there's a lot of people who are struggling with these things who don't even know it. Um, the statistics you mentioned made me think of something that sat with me since I began recovery, and that's that 9% of the US population specifically will develop an eating disorder at some point within their lifetime. And I mean, that's a terrifying statistic. It's not the way it should be, but it's definitely not spoken about enough. No.
Well, I'll say, and Olivia, then, I have a comment for everything. So, it's really interesting for me because I mean, I have stories about when I was younger, but I'll say the one thing that still kills me today is when people will come up to me, because I have lost weight over the last year and a half, and people will come up to me and say, wow, you look great. You've lost so much weight. Okay, I don't look great because I lost weight. Like, that's the biggest insult you can give someone. And that's like, it's a complex, right? As soon as someone starts saying that to you, it's just wrong. So I want everybody that's listening to really think about that. People don't look great because they're skinny or because they've gained weight. They look great because they are who they are. And I think we need to reframe that. And you can say, hey, you look great in that dress, however you want to say something, but don't say you look great because you lost weight, because then as soon as I gain the weight back, because I will, because that's what I do, then I look in the mirror and think, oh, I look horrible. I look horrible. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
100%.
I think that so many people, especially our generation, Hayley, have such a complicated relationship with food where, like, I absolutely love food. I love to cook. I love to try new places, but like, it's also something that I'm always kind of mindful of, which takes an element of fun out of it. And like in my darkest moments, I was way too strict about it. And that was like, I don't know, it makes something that should like be a lot of fun, like going out with friends, ordering a drink, ordering an appetizer, such a stressful experience when it's just supposed to be a means of catching up.
100%. I think that both of the points you guys made are so important. I think one, there is that focus on weight loss and thinking that, people look better because they've lost weight. I think that, again, like you said, Simone, that is a complete misconception. And the thing is too, making those comments just perpetuates whatever that person is potentially struggling with. I know for myself, like when I first started losing weight at the beginning of my eating disorder, before I even understood what was fully going on, the people who I walked around in high school with, they were like, oh my God, you look so great. Like, what workout plan are you on? Are you dieting? Like, give me your tips. And that made me feel so good about myself. Like, I felt like I was doing something right. And so, I persisted on that path. And not saying it's anyone's fault, but like you really have to think about the comments that you're making, because you don't know what someone's struggling with. You don't know why they've lost weight. They could be really sick. They could be struggling with something mental. They could have some kind of physical thing going on. You just don't know. And I think that's definitely lost on people. Yeah.
And do you feel like you had, like what Olivia was saying before about that relationship with food, where you feel like if you go out with your friends and you have something to eat and they're not eating it, like, okay, this is no longer okay. And then you feel guilty and then you feel bad about yourself. And
100%, just like both of you are saying, I think the preoccupation with food, it takes a lot of fun out of things. I remember I had a huge fear of eating in front of people. That was a really big thing for me. And so I would decline on invites to go out to dinners with my friends or ice cream with my friends or family or whoever, simply because I was like, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to be eating in front of you. But also, it wasn't fun for me anymore. That wasn't what I wanted to spend my time doing. Because there was so much preoccupation with the idea of food, and it certainly sucks the fun out of it. And yeah, like it really does kind of just take a hold and take control of your life in that way. Yeah.
I was reading, so I'm working on my second book, and it's called Label Me Not. And one of the things I was thank you, I was doing some research on is talking about food and the labels. There's a lot of labels regarding that, but the idea, there's a study that I read that was called "You Are What Your Peers Eat." So basically, as soon as you're exposed to peers that are on low calorie, you're going to eat low calorie. Where if you would have gone to the restaurant maybe by yourself, you would have done something different. But now if you're with your peers, especially in you guys' age group, then all of a sudden the focus is on, oh, if they're going to eat low fat, I'm going to eat low fat. Or if they're eating
Yeah.
keto, I'm going to eat keto. So what do you think, Liv?
I mean, I was just thinking of like TikToks I keep seeing of people being like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to get something or I'm not going to get a sweet treat unless you get one," which I mean, to a lesser extent, but it's like, yeah, it's totally like a disordered mindset of like, I'm not going to eat food unless you eat food. And I'm not going to have that because, oh, well, you're getting a salad and I want a burger. Well, I'm going to get a salad because there's such a big difference between a salad and a burger.
Absolutely. And, something that's interesting that reminds me of is like, eating like a carb, for example, an apple for like, carbs versus bread carbs. Either way, you're eating carbohydrates, but in people's minds, having the apple is better than having the bread. Um, and I think, also what you were saying, Liv, about, just like that idea of kind of not ordering something if your friends aren't,
Mm-hmm.
that's certainly something that I've experienced too. I think that's very prominent in our age group. I remember going out to, in the beginning of my eating disorder developing, I would go out with friends and um, I would go around to everyone. I'd be like, what are you ordering? Like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
ordering? What are you ordering? And in the end, everyone ended up with the exact same salad, which
Yeah.
is so ridiculous.
And it's funny because Olivia, she asked what you're ordering because she doesn't want to order the same thing as you.
That's
She's
like my
got this,
biggest pet peeve at restaurants is when
That's
people
so
order the same
smart,
thing at the
though.
table.
yeah,
Yeah.
So dumb. Just take a bite from someone else's,
yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to try everything.
Yeah.
But even I don't know, I recently I've decided to like stop ordering out as much just because my bank account is really hurt. But I've like seen
Valid.
even in my friends, like if I'm not gonna order with them, they're not going to.
And not because for them, it's not because of the financial part. It's just they have like this feeling of guilt that they're
Yeah.
ordering food,
And
which
I didn't even realize like how much that impacted people. I like this is a memory I keep in my head. I freshman year was not doing so well with my eating, and I ordered a chicken patty without the bread. And then one of my friends came up to me afterwards and she's like, "Oh my God, like you're so smart. Like I shouldn't have gotten the bread. Like, oh my gosh." And I was like, "No, like I'm really struggling right now and to eat that bread would stress me out to the max." And you just like I never wanted her to feel like that, but she obviously didn't understand what I was going through. It's just funny how your actions can really impact people without you even knowing.
and again, it's because we don't
Absolutely.
talk about these things, right? Like we need to talk about these things more as like this is what I'm struggling with because it's real. Um, so if you'll again, I understand anorexia, but can you explain to our audience anorexia nervosa?
Yeah, of course. So, in actual, I guess, psychology definitions in the DSM, it's categorized by having an abnormally low body weight, a fear of gaining weight, and a distorted perception of your weight. Um, Now, a really huge component of all of these things is control. A lot of people feel out of control in their life in other ways and in other pieces of their life. And so they feel like the one thing that they actually can control is their food intake. And so that leads to, in terms of anorexia, a lot of people will start restricting their intake because they feel like that's the one thing that they can actually control is what's going into their bodies. Another key component is that it really interferes with your daily life, like we were talking about before, in terms of, maybe passing up on going out to dinner with your friends, but even to the extent of not being able to focus in class because you don't have enough energy from food that you've eaten that day to carry you through. Um, I, for myself and for a lot of other people with anorexia as well, they'll over exercise in order to try and burn more calories faster, which is really dangerous because a lot of people don't tend to have the calories in their body in the first place in order to then go and over
Mhm.
exercise or even exercise in the first place. And so it's a lot of, denying your hunger cues, restricting your intake, and that leads to a lot of other physical and emotional, psychological symptoms. A lot of people will, their periods will cease. Their hair will fall out. They'll feel really dizzy when they stand up, things like that. And then more psychologically, depression, anxiety, a lot of different symptoms that kind of come along with it as well.
So Liv, did you see that statistic about anorexia nervosa that I put on the Google Doc?
The mortality rate.
Yeah, read that out because
The,
that one,
so
like, it's
anorexia
a scary
nervosa,
thing.
yeah, it has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder. And the mortality rate associated with anorexia nervosa is 12 times higher than the death rate of all causes of death for females 15 to 24 years old. And without treatment, up to 20% of people with serious eating disorders do not survive, which is insane.
That
Yeah.
completely
Especially
shocked me.
because
And
of the percentage of the population that this affects. This is not just a rare thing at all.
Yeah, it's really scary when you think about it in terms of those kinds of numbers. And I think, the numbers are so high because it's a silent killer. People aren't talking about it. And when you're experiencing it, you're certainly not talking about it either. Like for me, at least, I don't even know that I was fully aware of what was going on until the very end. Um, and it wasn't something that I felt comfortable enough at that time in my life to speak up with people and talk about it and be like, hey, I'm struggling. Like, I need some help. Um, and so because of that, it gets worse. And a lot of people don't get help. There's also, some financial barriers to treatment. Even some people who want to get help simply cannot. Um, yeah. And something else another statistic actually that these ones reminded me of as well is that, 1 in 5 people with anorexia actually die by suicide.
oh, wow.
Um, and so that, that's pretty heavy too. And I think that speaks to, the true mental toll that something like this takes on you. Um, and like we were saying before, it's simply not something that people take serious enough. And yeah, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, I think if people started looking at the numbers, I think they would really understand it's not someone on a diet. Hello, that's
Yeah.
not what
Right.
an eating disorder is. And
Right.
when we talk about body image, there are so many statistics and how far this goes back to when you're a kid. But I mean, I remember for me, my struggle with my body started when it was probably even younger. When I was really little, I was called spider legs because I was so skinny and I had a hard time gaining weight. That went away once I hit puberty. And I remember when I was 16 years old, my boyfriend at the time told me he couldn't believe how many stretch marks I already had. He was shocked by how many stretch marks I already had. We went out to dinner and he told me that I should probably have a salad at dinner. And of course I did because I was like, I don't want to say I was shocked. I mean, I think I just was I needed someone else's approval for what I was doing. And so I did. I had a salad at dinner, no dressing, then went home and cried myself to sleep. And I won't forget that moment. That was really, for me, overall, beginning of my journey with self-doubt. When I looked at the menu, guess what I wanted? The chicken wings with blue cheese. But guess what I had? The salad with no dressing because he made me feel that I wasn't enough if I ate something that, oh my gosh, I have so many stretch marks already. Like it was a killer for me. And I'm 51 years old. I have forgotten probably most conversations in my life from when I was younger. And that one will stick with me forever because it was heartbreaking to me. And it really started my journey with self-doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Like, I think it's really difficult when there's people right in front of you who are telling you, this is the way you should
Yeah.
be, and you should be making moves in that direction to get back to that place once you've left it. And I think that's, for a lot of people, that's why it's so hard to even feel confident in your body because there's constant commentary from everyone around you
Mm.
about what you should be doing or what you should be eating or how you should look. And those comments are just absolutely disturbing. And it's sad because I think people and women specifically receive commentary like that on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that you said, Mom, that really stuck with me is like the idea of validation. And like a lot of it is fueled by validation. For me, at least, it was just like, oh, because everyone, and I know it's like good-willed, but everyone does compliment you, whether it's like, I mean, at one point I was super sick and I lost a ton of weight for Crohn's. And I mean, you said straight up to me that, Mom, that you were like, you look sickly, but like a lot of other people were like, oh my God, congratulations, you look amazing. But like inside my intestines were literally rotting away and I couldn't even keep food down.
Yeah. we put too much, it's not just pressure, but I mean, too much value in the model body, which the model body, I
Ridiculous.
mean, come on, you know how, I mean, when we talk about eating disorders and models, they're through the roof. There's very few, I want to say, especially women, very few people, but especially women that can maintain a body like that with actually nourishing their body, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's just not healthy.
Absolutely. No, it's not at all. And do you know what? Something else that, I've learned over the course of recovery is the fact that there's literally not an ideal body, period, point blank. But even the idea of the ideal body changes throughout time. So what's ideal right now was not ideal 10 years ago, and it wasn't ideal
Yeah.
20 years ago, and it wasn't ideal 50 years before that. It's continuously changed. One of my favorite things to look at is like, the sculptures of like the Greek gods that are, in museums and things like that. And they're pictured as like normal sized human beings. They have like belly rolls and things like that. And we're all like, oh my gosh, they're beautiful. But that's not our standard
Mm-hmm.
today.
Hmm.
Um,
So true.
yeah. And so I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind too. Like there's not an ideal body type anyway at all, but also the ideal that society has, it changes all the time. So you could work so hard to fit this ideal right now, but in 5 years, you're going to be ridiculously unhappy because there's going to be a new Kardashian or whoever it is that's going to set the
Exactly.
standard.
I remember Vogue released an article a couple of years ago that was like big boobs are out. And that just like that statement
Yes,
in itself, you can't just declare a body part out of style. That's not how anything works, but it's how our
100%.
society works.
Yeah, it's it's really hard when you look at how the societal pressures, and so when you're struggling with something and then society says you need to be doing this, it just has to make it so much worse. So, I know you said earlier that you didn't really think about or realize that you had an eating disorder until way down the line. So tell us a bit more about that, and did you think anything was going on, or you just were kind of
Yeah.
going through?
So it's interesting because in terms of the eating disorder, I think for the most part, I was kind of just like going through my life.
Mhm.
I wasn't concerned, to be honest, about my eating. And I think most of that comes from the fact that dieting is so normalized. I was like, I'm doing the right thing. People were constantly complimenting me. They're like, wow, you're having salad for lunch again. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you're doing great. And so, I know I didn't really feel like I was doing something wrong in that sense. But what I will say is I felt the difference inside of my body. I was having all of these physical symptoms that really correlate with anorexia. Like I mentioned before, my hair was falling out, my nails were breaking, I was freezing cold all the time. I was isolating myself. I didn't want to do anything. If I was going to go out to eat, I was checking the menu first, counting the calories, seeing what I could eat.
Mhm.
Um, and so from that perspective, I think I knew that something was a little bit off, but I don't think that I was fully aware that I was doing something that was actually really bad for me.
Mhm.
I also think something that stood out for me the most was actually the depression. Um, it started to just, get worse and worse over time. And I think because of that, it started to really scare me because as it got worse, I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to feel so sad and so, hopeless and all of these things. And so that was kind of my marker of like, I've had enough and I'm going to, go to therapy. I'm going to try and fix this because I don't want to feel this way. And so I was at the University of Michigan at the time and I withdrew and came home in order to go to therapy, which I was then diagnosed with anorexia at. And I think that was my first moment where I was like, oh,
Mhm.
the pieces kind of fell into place. And I feel like I really fully understood, the big picture and how all of these different things, the depression and the anxiety and like the compulsions and things like that, I was understanding how they were all kind of fitting together and working together to kind of create this monster that was living inside of my brain. Um, so yeah, I think it was kind of in that moment when I realized that there was something that it was more than what I thought was wrong. There was like other things at play. And so that was when I like really dove into treatment and was like, there's, it was very overwhelming, but super worth it. And yeah, I would say that's probably when I really figured it out, because I think for the most part, I was kind of blinded to it. And I was like, this is normal. And this is what everyone else around me is doing, even though that it wasn't to that extent. It wasn't like normal dieting.
What did your parents see, and what did they, because again, as a parent, when I take a step back and I see things happening and you're like, I'm a fixer, like, let me see how can I fix this? And sometimes that's really hard because you guys don't want our help so much sometimes, right? And it's like we have to be like very specific and say like this is what's happening. So what did your parents see, and how did that work?
Yeah. So I think, some of the things that my parents probably saw as like warning signs a bit. I think, first it was probably more difficult for them to see what was really going on because I was away at school,
Mm-hmm.
for like half of it, I guess I would say. And so because of that, I don't know, they weren't able to fully recognize as much because there was a lot that I was doing when I wasn't home. Um, also a lot of the disorder is in secret. So it was a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
me trying to hide from everyone what I was doing. So something I would say though that would like qualify as a warning sign that I think my parents definitely picked up on would be like the food talk. There's a really huge preoccupation with food, like we were kind of talking about before, that comes along with anorexia and with other eating disorders. And so because I was thinking about food so much, it started coming out honestly like word vomit. I'd be talking about food all the time. I would be like, what are we doing for dinner? I need to look up the menu. I got to do this. Or what are we having for lunch? I need to like meticulously plan out the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a little bit disconcerting because I tend to be very go with the flow. Um, I would say also cutting out food groups. When I first went vegetarian, which was what I think was the trigger of my eating disorder starting. Um, it wasn't for health reasons or anything like that. I just started to get like freaked out by the idea of eating meat, and so I cut it out. And then as a result of that, I started cutting out other things. Um, and so it kind of just like snowballed. And so sometimes that can be a warning sign. And I think that's something my parents picked up on as well at the time. Um, and then I would say also body checking is a really big one. A lot of that I was doing, in secret in my own room. But there were definitely times where I would be, eating dinner and I'm kind of like squeezing different parts of me. And I know that that did not go unnoticed. So I would say that as well. And, the depression, I think, was the biggest part. I think just seeing how out of it and sad I was, and just like in general feeling down, not wanting to eat. I think that definitely, you know, gave them some kind of idea that like something was a bit off, even if they didn't know exactly what it was. And in terms of the help too, I think, hindsight is 2020. And I think looking back at it, I'm sure it was ridiculously hard for my parents
Mm-hmm.
because I was very adamant at the time, that I was like, I'm fine. I don't need help.
Mm-hmm.
And, over time, I learned to accept that help. And I think a lot of me not wanting the help in the beginning was because I felt like I was burdening my parents and my family by like telling them about all these issues and all the things that I was experiencing and the struggles I was having. Um, and, you know, looking back at it, I wish I would have just been right up front and just told them what was going on because I needed help. I couldn't have gone through this recovery process on my own. I needed kind of a guiding hand. I needed a little push. Um, and my parents definitely provided that for me. I think, quite honestly, they did a really good job of balancing between kind of getting on my case about making sure I'm eating meals and doing, going to therapy and doing all these things. But also, they let me figure things out on my own as well and weren't, just, I guess, super overbearing in that kind of a respect. Um, but I'm not a parent yet, but I can only assume that it's really difficult. I can't imagine watching your child or someone you love go through something like that. And of course you want to be there for them. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely a really difficult balance. But it's important when you start seeing kind of these warning signs that, you try to get involved to some extent, whether that's actually speaking to the person or it's kind of just like watching from the sidelines to make sure that they're all right. Um,
Was there So you talk about like you felt like it was going to be like a burden by having these conversations. Was there also a sense of guilt? Did you feel like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I felt really guilty. I think that's still actually one of the things that I probably struggle with now is that feeling of guilt. I think I felt really guilty for putting my family through that kind of a thing. Like I was not so much of a pleasure to be around at that time in my life. And so, that took a toll on everyone. And now being out of it a little bit, I can see that it really like I'm really aware of the toll that it took. And I think there's certainly guilt that surrounds that. And I think I also, I felt guilty because I thought with me struggling with those things was like some kind of commentary on like the parenting that I
mm,
received. And so I think I felt guilty about that as well because I didn't want people, I think I have like the best parents ever. I didn't want people to look at my family and be like, ooh, like they messed up, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah,
Um, yeah, so
but
definitely a lot of guilt in those
yeah, and
respects.
I look at it too, and I say for us that as a parent, like there should never be guilt from your child. And again, I understand that, when you're going through, when you have an eating disorder, when there's something mental health wise, you do feel this sense of guilt. But all we want
Hmm.
as parents is for you guys to be healthy and happy, and whatever success means to you, that's what we want. We just, again, yes, I would love to fix everything. That's not how the world works, but we just want you guys to be happy. And we don't feel that. I would never think that my kids should feel guilty towards me. And I know your mom, and she absolutely doesn't think that as well.
Yeah.
It's just such a hard thing. I think when you go through something like this, you're like, okay, I should feel guilty because I, was very difficult or whatever. I mean, when I was 15, let me tell you, like I was 16, 17. It wasn't until I went away to college I started getting better. But I still have this sense of guilt when I look back at how I treated my parents or how I behaved at the time. And, but as a parent, I will say that don't have that sense of guilt. Just get the help that you need because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point and something, that I learned in therapy that like sticks out for me is that I felt like by telling my parents, I was going to give them like more to worry about and give them more anxiety over
Mhm.
my situation. But actually, by not opening up and telling them things, I was actually giving them more
Yeah.
anxiety about those things, because then they're sitting around worrying like, oh, what is she feeling? What is like, how's the day going, etc. Rather than me just being like, I'm having a bad day. Please help me make lunch, whatever it may be. Um, I and my parents have told me the same thing as well. They were like, we would much rather you come to us and tell us what's going
Mm.
on so that either we can help and support you, or like at the very least, if you don't want that help or support right now, at least we know what's going on, and can kind of like secretly help from the sidelines.
Yeah, monitor a bit and just,
Yeah,
because it is
absolutely.
it's such a hard thing as a parent. And obviously it's such a hard thing as a child because you feel guilty that we're going to feel bad and we feel bad. We feel guilty that you're feeling bad. So it's like this horrible cycle of really just each other wanting to help each other.
Absolutely.
And yeah, sometimes as a parent, the best help we can get is to stand at the sidelines and just kind of monitor and say, at some point we have to say like, okay, like this is what we're seeing. What can we do? And a lot of times the answer I
Right.
get is, I'm good. And I know that like Olivia's pretty good about saying, okay, I'm really struggling with this, and she's
Yeah.
and and the biggest thing I want my kids to understand is I'm never judging, that I'm here to help and never judging, because that's not what we're here for as parents. We're here to, again, make sure you're happy and healthy and, again, successful in how you want to be successful. So
Yeah, I love that.
let's talk about common misconceptions about anorexia or eating disorders in general, because I'm sure there are a lot of them. And especially just thinking about people are like, oh, she's just on a diet. Like, so I'm sure there's a
Yeah.
lot of misconceptions.
No, 100%. I think, we've kind of touched on them a little
Hmm.
bit, some of them, but the first one I can think of is that an eating disorder isn't serious. That is a super common misconception because it's
Mhm.
the exact opposite, as we just, read off all of those statistics. deadly. It is super serious. And it needs to be taken seriously. And I think a lot of people, whether they're going through it themselves or they're watching someone else go through it, they're like, oh, it's not such a big deal. They'll be fine. Like you said, it's just a diet,
Mm.
it's just whatever. And that's not the case at all. It's really serious. Um, I think something else that is a really common misconception is that you need to be crazy thin to have an eating
Yeah.
disorder,
Mm.
which is super not true. Um, Anorexia specifically does have like a weight kind of a category where they
Hmm.
say you have to have like an abnormally low body weight, but that's not necessarily something you can visually see. For a lot of people, that low body weight is it, they just look a little smaller than they did
Yeah.
previously. It's not such a massive difference. And there are a lot of other eating disorders too where you maybe you don't lose any weight, you're just controlling your food and doing things in other ways, or you're out of control with the food.
Yeah.
So the idea that you need to be thin, have this like emaciated look to you is super incorrect. And I think it's unfortunate because a lot of people then, you know, they don't believe you that you have an eating
Mm.
disorder. They don't think you do, or they think you do when you don't.
Hmm.
Um, something that I think is really important to emphasize is that an eating disorder is not a weight disorder, two very different things. Um, and you don't need to be a certain weight in order to have an eating disorder. Um, and then something else that I think is super important too is the fact that an eating disorder, people tend to think that, especially something like anorexia, is a choice or
Mm.
it's a disorder of vanity in that kind of a way. But that's not the case at all. I didn't wake up every morning and be like, and like decide that, I just wasn't going to eat today. I was like, oh, cool. I don't want it. I'm not going to do it. It was there was a voice in my brain. It wasn't me. I wasn't making the decision. I remember I would be like crying in bed because all I wanted to do was eat a bag of potato chips or have a Hershey Kiss, and I physically could not get out of bed to do that. My I like to call it my eating disorder brain. So I have like my eating disorder brain and then my logical brain. And my eating disorder brain would be like, you don't need that, so you're not going to eat it. And then I wouldn't. But that wasn't my choice. That was something that was wrong in the chemistry of my brain and was pushing me towards making those decisions. And it also wasn't about having a specific body type. I think there's a common misconception about that as well, that, everyone who has an eating disorder, it stems from wanting to be thin or look a certain
Mm.
way. And while that may happen at some point later down the line, that like, you start losing weight and you're like, oh, I love this. And then you keep going.
Hmm.
That's still not coming from a point of vanity. That's coming from a disordered perspective. And so I think, yeah, I think people just don't seem to really understand these, that these are misconceptions and
Mm.
that, you know, it's not a choice. Like, would you choose to have a life-threatening illness? You probably would not.
Yeah,
So,
No,
exactly.
you can't
absolutely
push
not.
that narrative on an eating disorder either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
I
go.
think the whole idea of it being like a vanity disorder takes a lot of the seriousness away from it and takes like a lot of
Absolutely.
people just don't think it's important then, when in actuality, like these statistics earlier, so many people are dying from something that could be, just if we talked about it more, it could be severely reduced.
Yeah. And when
Absolutely.
what you just talked about, common misconceptions with if people aren't super skinny, then they don't have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And you can see, I can actually like see it inside my head where someone would just say, oh, no way, they don't have an eating disorder. Like they're not
Right.
struggling, like they're overweight. Well, okay, it doesn't work that way. And mental health
Yeah.
does not work that way at all.
No, not at all. And you know, it's usually for the most part, it's those aren't physical ailments. They might manifest in some physical ways, like the symptoms I mentioned, but it's not a physical illness, it's a mental one.
Hmm.
Um, Something that made me think of actually is I had a friend while I was at Michigan, and I didn't even think about this before when we were originally discussing, did I realize that something was going on? But as things started getting worse, I actually confided in a friend and I was like, I think I might have an eating disorder. And they looked at me and they were like, there's no way. Like, you look fine, like you whatever.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, I actually was really struggling at the time. And when they said that to me, I just, I think I froze, I shut down, and I was like, okay, well, if they don't think I have one, and I'm not skinny enough to have an eating disorder, then I guess I don't. It's just all in my head. And like that's not okay either.
Yeah, I mean, our friends should be our support system, whatever we need
For
support
sure.
with. And do you look back at photos and think, I can't believe?
Do you know what? It is honestly terrifying sometimes when I look back at pictures because I remember being in these like very specific moments where, I'm out with friends and or we're going to the beach or we're doing something. I don't know, but there's game days, like that was a huge one. And there's all these photos and I remember looking through my pictures and being like, "Oh, I don't look like I look bad in that one. Oh my God, I'm like so fat today. Like I look so bad today." And obviously all of these were very it like distorted thoughts.
Mhm.
And my perception in general was just very distorted. Like I did not understand what I looked like. And when I look back at those photos now that like at the time I thought like, oh, my belly was poking out too much, or like, oh, my thighs look big, or something like that. I look back now and I am absolutely astounded because
Mm,
I didn't exist. And I think that too just goes to show that like it's not even it's not even a body thing. Like it's so entirely mental. You just don't like you can't through even just through your own eyes are lying to you basically. Um,
right.
and that's a
And then,
scary thought too. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, looking at, so, which kind of leads into my next question about, how do you think social media plays a role in body image and eating disorders? Because if you're looking at it and saying, I can't believe, but other people are looking at it and saying, oh, she looks amazing, right?
Yeah.
I
right.
mean, that just kind of seems like it continues the cycle.
Absolutely. I think, especially with social media, I think that has perpetuated, unfortunately, a lot of body image issues for a lot of people. Um, and it's hard because, social media is a highlight reel. No one's posting on social media about, oh my God, I had such a sad day today, or, I like couldn't even get out of bed to go to my class. I couldn't get in the shower or brush my teeth, or I only ate like a handful of almonds or something like, people aren't like no one's posting and sharing these aspects of their life. And so all you see are the bright spots. You see the cool
Hmm.
vacations, you see the fancy dinners, you
Mhm.
see the happy, healthy relationship. And, not only do you only see the highlights, but the highlights are edited, whether that's just a simple filter or it's a complete Photoshop. The bodies you're seeing online and the things people are doing that you're comparing yourself to and comparing your body to, that life doesn't exist and that body might not even exist. And you never know. It's not only people like your friends and family that you follow now, but it's celebrities, it's other random people across the internet. And how are you supposed to know if they're editing their photos? Like you don't. And so I know something for me that like really stuck in terms of social media was the idea that I was comparing my body to bodies that didn't even exist.
Yeah.
um yeah, and so that's really horrible, and I think it certainly perpetuates this idea of I need to look a certain way, or this is the ideal body, I need to lose this kind of weight, and things like that. People post about their diets all the time too, and they're like, oh, you should try this 5 calorie meal, and
Yeah. It's
it's
ridiculous.
like trendy, it's on TikTok or something, and everyone's like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna try it or whatever. And yeah, it just perpetuates the cycle. I think it makes things a lot worse. I'm sure Olivia too, like you've had experiences with that as
Oh,
well.
like absolutely. I mean, even just like the idea of like 75 hard right now, which is some ridiculous like diet
Yes.
workout trend, but it's completely unattainable. And there are people that are doing it, and to some extent, like their relationship with food is not as healthy as it should be. And by them posting about it, they're kind of perpetuating that this is an okay thing to do. And it's like it's okay to do 3 workouts a day, but then not nourish your body to the extent it needs to be nourished. Like there's a line, and I feel like something that's not commonly discussed is how to yeah, work out and be fit, but also like keep your body nourished and healthy and eat what you want to eat. It's always either you're working out
Absolutely.
to be super skinny or super muscly, or you're not working out at all.
Is that a word,
It's,
muscly?
I think so.
We're gonna go with it. There's a song that and I can't think of the name of the song where it talks about body image, and she talks about the fact that the person that she's looking at isn't even a woman, it's a man, like it's a man from,
Oh, Victoria's Secret.
yes.
When I
Yes,
first heard,
Victoria's Secret. Yes.
yeah, when
Yes.
I first heard that song, I literally started crying because I was like, no one has ever put my feelings like
Mm.
into a song in words like that before. Um, Loved it, 10 out of
Yeah.
10. But it's even sad in the first place that a song has to be written like that for someone. And I remember on TikTok, I was seeing videos of these really, really little girls, like 5, 6 years old, singing this song. And I was like, it like pained me. I was like, you're so
Yeah.
small and you already understand what this is like, you know? Um, yeah, it's really astounding. But I think
Yeah.
also in that way, while social media can be really toxic, I think there's also bright spots you can find on social media. For example, creators who write songs like that, who want to empower, the new generation of women and men and whoever else to know that their body is okay and they don't need to change it. And, there's nothing wrong with who they
Mhm.
are and the way that they look. And I think that's super cool. Like that's kind of what I tried to do too. When I created my mental health and eating disorder recovery Instagram account, was kind of try to create a space on social media where people, felt accepted and understood and knew that there was someone out there who was being real with them and who could talk about those kinds of things. Like I would post videos of me crying and I'd be like, guys, this is what recovery looks like, and that's okay. Um, and so I think there's definitely some authenticity that you can find on social media, which can be really helpful when you're struggling because you can find someone else who maybe understands what you're going through or who you can connect with who lives in
Mhm.
another country or something like that. Um, but of course, there's certainly so much toxicity too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look for it, and I think you have to understand everything with a grain of salt. So when you're seeing these, well, I want to say women, but obviously men posing as whatever it is, like you're seeing these
Right.
situations, a lot of it isn't real. And trying to get our younger kids to understand that and appreciate themselves for exactly who they are. I mean, with Olivia's younger sister, I mean, I think she's pretty comfortable in her body, but
Yeah, as comfortable as a high
yeah,
schooler can be.
yeah. I mean, but it's a constant conversation about stuff. It's not like, and
Definitely.
I it's one of those hard things. So we're going over today, but I think it's important that we go over our time today. But so you just mentioned a little bit. So what does recovery look like?
Yeah. So in the beginning, recovery was super not pretty. It is a commitment that you wake up every morning and make to yourself. That this is the path you're choosing to take and this is what you're going to do. For me in the beginning, recovery looked like meeting with my treatment team, which was I had a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a nutritionist who all kind of worked together to help me move forward. I was pretty strictly regimented with eating. In terms of what I was eating, but also timing. I used to set alarms on my phone, which were really helpful at the time to kind of remind me, like, hey, it's lunchtime. Hey, it's snack time. Like, let's do these things. Um, and in the beginning, it was really, really difficult, but over time, it got a lot easier. And I think once I started eating and understanding that I was fueling my body and that was what it needed, and I'm not going to be able to do the things I want to do in my future if I don't eat enough, it really opened my eyes, I think, and helped me kind of get over the hurdle of, my eating disorder is telling the truth. And what I learned in recovery is that my eating disorder, in fact, was lying to me the entire time. Something I was always telling myself was that I would be happier if I could just like lose the last 5 pounds.
Mhm.
Or, if I just didn't eat the dessert, I would be happier. But that is like the world's biggest
Yeah.
lie. I was unbelievably unhappy. That was certainly the darkest time in my life. It was all a complete lie. And unfortunately, it was something that I believed. But recovery taught me that it was untrue and that I would be much, much happier if I just fed myself normally. So recovery for me today looks more like waking up in the morning, again, recommitting to myself, but being able to eat meals and snacks throughout the day, not at regimented times, just whenever I'm feeling hungry, eating whatever I want to eat, making sure, I'm still getting in the nutritional balance that I need in order to function properly, but not in a regimented way. And doing the things that I want to do. I am super excited to have just graduated and be going to law school. And those are things that I I didn't even think I was going to graduate. A few years ago, I thought I was going to fully drop out of school and be done and not go back because I was, I was just sad and I had no energy and I was struggling. And, here I am now. So, recovery is the light at the end of the tunnel, is what I would say. And it's something that you have to be willing to fight for each and every day, but it is so absolutely beyond worth it.
And leave us with something that you want other young women, girls, young women, women to take away from your experience.
I think there's two things that I think are really important. One is that you are not alone and you are never alone. There are so many other people around you who are struggling with, if not the exact same thing, something very, very similar, who are also silent. And, it may be hard to find those people, but they're out there. So I think it's important to understand that you're not alone. What you're going through isn't weird or strange. It's super common. And it's really important that you open up about it to normalize it for others. And, even if you can't go to that length, which is okay if you can't, because it's really personal, at the very least, reach out and get help because life is so much better without the eating disorder. And then second, I would say that there is so much more there's so many more important things about you than what you wear, what size you wear, how much you weigh, what your body shape is, what you look like, literally at all. That is super unimportant in comparison to who you are as a person and what you have inside and what you bring into the world. And yeah, there are so many more interesting things about you, and you will be able to move through life so much more freely and with so much more happiness if you just nourish your body the way that it is meant to be nourished, because your body is your best friend. It's there for you and it carries you throughout life and allows you to do all the things you want to do and go to new places and meet new people and try new foods. And you can't do any of that if you're, so hyper fixated on how you look or what size you're wearing. Like, no one cares. And if they do, that says much more about them than it does about you.
Yeah, I love that. And it is so true. Thank you so much for all this. Olivia, do you have a final thought? She has this calendar called
Unfuck Yourself. But my quote today is not very good. This quote this week is about others and learning to love others rather than learning to love yourself. But
yeah, typically we focus on learning to love yourself because that's the most important thing, is that trust me, I want to love my kids. I love them. I love my husband. I love my friends, but we have to love ourselves first. Yeah, we have to love ourselves first and respect ourselves and really take care of ourselves, because if we can't take care of ourselves, how do we take care of others? And as a mom, I focus on that. But
yeah, absolutely.
So Liv, any last thoughts?
Just learn to love yourself. And my computer's about to die. So
okay. Hayley, any last thoughts?
You know what? I'm always here. If anyone ever, anyone who's listening out there ever needs a friend or someone to talk to, I'm
share your
here.
Instagram. You can share your Instagram.
My Instagram is Healing Hayley. It's with 2 H's in the beginning. So H Healing Hayley. And
Hayley is Hayley.
Yeah. So feel free to send me a DM or anything. Yeah. My mailbox is always open.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. It was such a great conversation. I learned a lot. I know our listeners will learn a lot. And I think we all need to think about body image and eating disorders in a different way than we probably have in the past. So thank you for sharing your insight on all of that.
Definitely.
We will
Thank
see you
so
guys.
much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see you guys next time on the next episode of the Daughter Dearest podcast. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.